Welcome back. If you just joined us, you're still watching KTN Prime, and right now we're shifting gears to the discussion tonight, where we're talking about the 2026 budget policy statement. And by the way, this is the fourth to be prepared under the Kenya Kwanza administration, which sets out the government's policy priorities, fiscal strategy, and medium-term program implementation framework. Now, this is building on the strong foundations established over the past 3 years. The statement also consolidates progress achieved in implementing the bottom-up economic transformation agenda, the administration's flagship economic strategy aligned to the fourth medium-term plan of Vision 2030. I know we need to make sense of this jargon and make it understandable for the Kenyans, because as much as we want to talk about matters budget 2025, 2026, there are some things we need to make clear for Kenyans to understand what this is all about. And with me in studio, we have Alexander Riithi, who is the head of programs at the Institute for Social Accountability, on my near right. Thank you for coming.
Thank you for having me.
And we have Johnson Derry, who is an investment banker and also finance expert. Thank you for making time, Johnson.
Thank you for having me.
And we have also Dismas Mukua, who is a political and governance analyst. By the way, very vocal against anything that is anti-progress in the country.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for making time, Dismas.
Yeah.
Dismas is always very, very passionate about speaking for the Kenyans, and that's why we have him tonight. You need to help us to understand what is happening. But before we even go into the deep conversation, when we talk about the budget policy statement, for the sake of the Kenyan who's watching today, we don't want to use too much jargon. We want to make it understandable for the Kenyans, so that when they're making decisions or seeing the government making decisions, they understand and they're able to speak into the issues. I'll begin with you, Derry. When we talk about the budget policy statement, the government budget policy statement for this year, 2026, what is this all about?
So the BPS is a policy document. It's actually a requirement of law to be published. And it's supposed to essentially set the tone for the budget going into, well, because we start in 2026, mid-2026, all the way to mid-2026, mid-2027. So the budget that's going to come and be read in June, it's the end of June or early July, this sets the tone for that. So when you read this, you have a pretty good idea what to expect when they come through.
All right, and what are some of the components that are there when it comes to the budget policy? If we can just hear from you, Alexander, issues on the budget policy, as Johnson gives us at least a description, what is usually contained in the budget policy statement? Let's talk about the 2026 one.
Okay, thank you. In the budget making process as a country, there are a number of documents that are normally produced prior to the budget that is read in June, and the budget policy statement is the second major document that is produced, and it goes to Parliament by mid of February. So it went to Parliament by around 15th of February. The earlier one is called the budget review and outlook paper. So what the budget policy statement does, it provides the initial ceilings, or the ceilings or the budgetary allocations that are going to go to various sectors. It also provides for forecasts of revenue and also how much money is expected to go to the county government. It also provides for the major economic policies or the decisions that government is going to implement in the coming year that will help that government in achieving whatever it is they have laid forward. Within the budget policy statement, it also provides a forecast of the things that the government intends to achieve in that year. And within it, you will also find a bit of review of what has been achieved. And it also provides the macroeconomic outlook, starting from what are we doing at the global level, regional level, and also as a country. So that forms the basis of the budget that will be produced in April of a given year.
All right. And Dismas, when we talk about the 2026 budget policy, of course, there's a lot of conversation. You've probably had concerns about, the expenditure that has been rising over the years, and yet there's a downscale of what is supposed to be invested. I mean, some of the components of this budget policy for 2026, what do you make of how it looks right now? I mean, is it in line with the key priority areas that have been listed as a concern for the administration before it was actually granted power?
Well, as you indicated, this is the fourth budget policy statement being crafted or put together by the Kenya Kwanza administration. But I think it would be useful to understand that out of the entire budgeting making process, you get two important pieces of bills or legislation. That is the finance bill, which essentially captures how you are going to raise your finances, how you are going to raise your resources. And you remember the demonstrations we had last time, it was simply because of the because of the finance bill and how they are going to raise resources. And you recall that at that stage, a number of elected leaders, including the chairman of the Finance Committee at the National Assembly, they were very condescending. They spoke to Kenyans in a very rude manner. And in part, that is the reason why Kenyans said, wait a minute, we are presenting views. Instead of incorporating these views, you are behaving to us in a very, very condescending manner. And then at that stage, you also saw some elected leaders in a very primitive display of affluence, or rather opulence, that they buy top-of-the-range vehicles, chronometers, having single malt whiskey at the upmarket restaurants, while the rest of the Kenyans are wallowing in a miasm of poverty. So that raised issues. And then obviously you have the appropriation bill, which now authorizes the government to spend resources. But before you get those two bills, there is the first stage, which is formulation through the budget policy statement. Then now you go through the approval process where you get those two bills, and then you go through implementation, and then finally audit and the evaluation. But the biggest challenge you have in Kenya today is that people do not pay attention to the audit and evaluation of how the resources have been spent. And before we came on here, we're having a discussion, and we've said it's times above number. How come Kenya doesn't have a zero-based budgeting system? Which would mean that every accounting officer, in this case a principal secretary, they would justify their budgets for every financial period, and they begin from zero. Unfortunately, the obtaining situation in Kenya is, if this year your state department had a budget of, say, 10 billion, then you say next year we want 15 billion, then the other year we want 20 billion, and it keeps going up. And in my view, the Kenya Kwanza administration would probably need to consider having a zero-based budgeting so that it becomes efficient and effective. Now, a number of countries have made those statements that they're going to adopt a zero-based budgeting, but it ends up being a populist statement. Because in Kenya, and I can bet my grandfather's cows, if you go with zero-based budgeting, you will create so many loopholes. You will discover that majority of the procurement in Kenya is largely ineffective, and it's vendor-driven, and it's cartel-driven. I mean, have you ever wondered why this pen, if you go to a local supermarket, you will probably buy it for 10 bob, but the Kenyan government would buy it for 100 shillings. Why? At some stage, you were told that the government was going to embrace transparency as a model in procurement, that everything is going to be very visible. But if you try to look for that information, you will not get it. That is number one. Then number two, there is evidence that if you've got administrations which place a premium on meritocracy, they tend to have very good budgets, and they tend to have very good policy proposals. And Singapore is a good example, although now we're supposed to be on our way to Singapore, so I'll not use that as an example. I'll talk about a country like South Korea or Japan, where they've embraced meritocracy, where they ensure that it's the sharpest tools in the shed that go to the National Assembly that are responsible for making budgets. Now, in Kenya, in the public sector, public servants, you go to the National Treasury, you'll have some of the best, sharpest tools in the shed. But the people who take the political decisions are not necessarily the sharpest tools in the shed. So now you begin to wonder, then how is how do you take care of the citizens' interest? And the way you said about the jargon, it's very deliberate to make sure that people don't understand what is going on, so that we sit back. And the only time Kenyans begin to pay attention is when a few members of the civil society pick out obscene proposals, and then people now start paying attention.
Well, it's important to note that President William Ruto's embattled, administration has unveiled a 4.7 trillion budget plan for the 2026-2027 plan for fiscal year. Now, the high stakes, by the way, electorate blueprint is designed to balance the demands of a fiscally constrained government against the immediate needs of the restless Kenyans ahead of the 2027 general election. I needed to mention that just to at least paint a picture of why we are also having this discussion. Of course, very important to note is that ministries and departments, like you've mentioned, this must continue to defend budgets, and the cabinet is expected to receive a 495.7 billion shillings. And also, Treasury is expected to present proposals on pay deductions, and recurrent expenditure is expected to be at 3.46 trillion. Cabinet projects total revenues to hit 3.53 trillion. Interesting figures, Derry. But before I come to you, Johnson, you say zero budget.
Zero-based budgeting.
Yes, zero-based budgeting, Dismas. If you compare with what the government is doing now, just to make a distinction, what is that all about?
Now, the principal secretary in Kenya is defined as the accounting officer and as the authorized officer. As an accounting officer, you're in charge of resources, especially we're talking about money. And then as an authorized officer, you are responsible for the human resource. Now, if you are an accounting officer and you are in charge of the Kenyan shilling in your docket, the best practice would be, especially in the corporate sector, appears you're supposed to start crafting your budget from zero. Say that these are the projects you are working on, and this is what we intend to do next year, defined by the Kenya Kwanza administration priorities. And then you justify why you need every coin. So if you're going to tell us that my state department is going to buy 1 million of these water bottles, you need to justify why you're buying that water and what value it's going to add to your state department. If you're going to be buying flowers every day for your office, you need to justify. But the obtaining situation is that majority of the budgets, they say last year our budget was 1 million Kenyan shillings. Now when you look at inflation, when you look at interest rates, when you look at the prevailing political environment, let's make it 5 million for next year. That means that essentially what you are doing is you are hiding inefficiencies within your state department. In the corporate sector, if you're a department head and during the budgeting process, people actually sweat because you have scarce resources and you have to tell the board or you have to tell the cabinet or the National Assembly why you need these resources. Most of the conversations I see at the National Assembly, especially when the principal secretaries and the cabinet secretaries are doing their presentation, it seems like it's just ceremonial. And that would in part be because we probably don't have the sharpest tools in the relevant committees. And at this stage, one would expect anybody today wants to become the president of the Republic of Kenya, or even you want to become a governor. In fact, anybody who wants an elective position, they should give us their positions on this budget policy statement. They must address this budget, because what is the purpose of political power? You may have heard of a leader of a faction within the ODM saying we want power. So what is this power for? When you get this power, your principal responsibility is to collect resources and allocate resources. So they need to tell us that in the event that I become the president of the Republic of Kenya, this is how I'm going to do the proposals. You got best practices. Like for instance, this morning, the president of the US, he gave his State of the Nation address. So that is the position of the Republicans. But even the Democrats, using a governor, also gave their position. So when Mr. Mbadi presents his position on behalf of the Kenya Kwanza administration, we expect all these people who want to run for president to do the same. They've said, the Kenya Kwanza administration is wasting resources. A lot of money is going to State House to buy mandazi and tea and uji. But have they given us their position? Because what is the purpose of a budget? Number one, a budget is an accountability tool. Number one, it's an economic policy tool. And number three, is a management tool.
Let's hear from you, Johnson. We do know that the CS, the Treasury CS, John Buddy, has come under fire as early as today, by the way. And some of the key issues highlighted, and I think Dismas has mentioned, the spending within the State House. He's talking about the meals, some meals costing exorbitant, amount. And of course, we've had issues of the education sector and how much has been invested and what is being spent and how the education sector is doing. But let's talk about government spending and government wastage of resources. What are your thoughts, Johnson?
Number one, all government spending, all government waste, or rather, every time you hear government spending, just know there'll be government waste. That it's not a bug, it's a feature in all government spending. And it's global. You'll find it in the US. That's why many countries try to put a cap on government spending, because they know if you let your politicians run riot, nothing good will come out of it. They will spend to their heart's desires. And you can even tell from this design of the budget making process of the country. It starts with spending. We've talked a lot about spending, and we always talk about spending, but nobody actually even discusses the tax collection, because people want to spend fast and then try to figure out where the money will come from. Or rather, they want to lock in because spending is where you get your goodies, right, as a politician. So you want to lock that in, and then you'll figure it out later. But you see, it's a Kenyan who is going to pay for all this at the end of the day. So it's going to be sold as, look, if you want development, if you want to improve your standard of living, if you want to do this and that and the other, you need to allow us to spend fast. And then when it comes to the taxation, that's when the pain is really felt. And sometimes the taxation is deferred by borrowing. So they will spend now, don't worry, you won't raise taxation, but you make for the difference by borrowing. And then at some point in the future, the bill comes due. And of course, it becomes painful. So some of the things that I've picked up from the BPS, like they want to do, right? They have lofty objectives they want to achieve, and they tell you that we want to, amongst many other things, we want to achieve competitiveness, we want to achieve low cost of doing business, and then they go on to tell you how they want to achieve it because they want to spend here, and here, and here. But if you look at the history of such promises, whether they actually have delivered, because it's not the first time these things are being mentioned.
Do you think they have delivered?
No, I mean, we're always complaining of high cost. We've been complaining of high cost of living since 2007, I think 2006. We've been complaining of loss of competitiveness, I think, from 2013 or 2014 thereabouts, and it's beginning to tell in even our trade balance with our neighbors. For the first time, Uganda is now exporting more to us than us to them. It's not because we've been more competitive, obviously. Uganda has not improved in its competitiveness. It's us who's deteriorated. So when you look at these things and if you're able to tell what leads to what, you'll be able to see the contradictions inherent even in this BPS. Some of the things they're promising us they will achieve are impossible to achieve given the manner they want to pursue them.
All right. We'll take a short break and come back to discuss more on that, looking at government wastage, government spending, and the current proposed budget and what has been done by the current administration in the past, or rather in the current financial year. So stay tuned, don't go too far. We'll be back shortly.